Senate President Scutari is with us, who is the sponsor of the bill and would like to speak first.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senators, appreciate your time and consideration of S3214, A4769, making various revisions to requirements for obtaining a firearm purchaser card and handgun purchases. We've talked a lot about this since the Supreme Court's recent ruling, which invalidated New York laws, which were sufficiently similar to New Jersey laws with respect to how one obtained a carrier permit in New Jersey. Speaking from a gun owner's perspective, as well as someone that's been understood the rights to have a gun in New Jersey, as well as throughout this country in the Second Amendment, this bill is the best attempt that we've been able to come up with, and I believe it does, to meet that constitutional requirement, but continuing to safeguard the public from unnecessary guns being out there. I mean, the New Jersey I grew up with, you just did not see guns. It's just not something we noticed. We never had gun restrictions in New Jersey. Have always been very tightly regulated. This bill continues down that path with respecting the ruling of the Supreme Court, which did away with one of the requirements that we had in New Jersey. Just to go over where we were historically in New Jersey, in order to obtain a carrier permit, you used to have to prove a justifiable need. Under the court's decisions in New Jersey, that was very rarely given. Other than law enforcement officers, most individuals could not prove a justifiable need in New Jersey to carry a gun. The Supreme Court said that that wasn't appropriate any longer. New York's law was sufficiently similar for us to realize that our law, probably although not specifically challenged, would no longer be constitutionally valid. This bill allows for gun carrying permits for individuals in certain circumstances, but not in certain sensitive places, as delineated throughout the bill. I think this bill takes the right approach. It's a balanced approach with much consultation from law enforcement. I understand that law enforcement's union leaders have unanimously supported this bill, including the STFA, the PBA, the FOP, and the Retired Officers Associations. All are in support of this bill because they believe it is the best chance that we have to continue to maintain the lifestyle that we're accustomed to in here in New Jersey, not having additional and lots of guns in places that are troublesome, which is codified by sensitive places, but still allows for retired law enforcement officers, others involved in law enforcement, to carry their guns in not only public but in sensitive places. This is going to be challenged, there's no doubt, but we believe that it's struck the right balance and it will meet constitutional muster. It's going to be challenged. Let's hope that every part of this bill is found to be constitutional. I believe it will be, and it's our best effort to be balanced in our approach to ensure that gun advocates, as well as individuals that are concerned with gun safety, can meet in the middle and have this bill as something that we can all be proud of and support. With that, I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the members for your consideration of what I think is a very important piece of legislation. Thank you.
Senate President, just one clarification. I think you've reported that law enforcement, both current law enforcement and retired law enforcement, are in support of the amendments that you have made, correct? That
is correct. They have not only supported it publicly, they have submitted position papers, my understanding, to the Assembly committees as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senators. Senate Minority Leader.
Wayne Blanchard, State Troopers Fraternal Association, in favor, no need to testify. George Wren, President, Former Troopers Association, in favor, no need to testify. Linda Abrams, Moms Demand Action, in favor. These are all in favor, no need to testify. Kathy McGeehan, Moms Demand Action for Guns. Tanya Shart, representing the Brady Group. Ronnie Wheel, Moms Demand Action for Guns. Terry Martineco, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. Mary Journey, moms demand action. Jennifer Gonzalez, moms demand action. Teresa Turner, moms demand action. Nico Bacour, apologize if I get your name wrong, representing the Giffords Association. James Cobb, representing the Shipping Association of New York and New Jersey, that's our ports, and Elizabeth and Bayonne. Jennifer Mancuso, Fair Share Hospitals Collaborative Effort, and Catherine Arland, representing herself, in favor of no need to testify. Lisa Winkler, moms demand action for gun sales. Okay, in favor, no need to testify. Okay, in no particular order, these are some folks who would like to come up and testify. I apologize, they're in no particular order. We're going to start with Nick. We'll do it in panels, so we'll bring two up at a time. Nicolas Lovett, representing New Jersey Sharpshooter. And is Mike Glenn? Come on up, Michael. Lisa Winkler, if she wanted to testify, we'll get back to her, okay? We'll come back to you. Sorry about that. It was all in the pile of no need to testify. Nicholas, I called you up first, sir, and then Michael.
Thanks. Thanks, committee, for having me. My name is Nicolas Lovett. I represent NJ Sharpshooters. We're a grassroots training organization in the state of New Jersey that focuses on training. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak on behalf of our members and all of the legal gun owners in the state of New Jersey. I just want to point something out. The reason why law enforcement and the organizations support this bill is because their restrictions were removed from the bill. They originally were against it, but now their restrictions were removed, so now they are in favor of it. So I just wanted to point that out. I had a testimony written out, but I figured I'd start with a story. There's a man named Joe Lazito who was traveling to work on February 12th, 2011. He was on the subway heading to his job like on any normal day. He saw two police officers walk onto the subway cart, get into the conductor's booth, which he thought was weird, and the rest of the car was empty. He thought, that's strange. He sat there on the subway landing. They just sat there waiting. Then he sees another man get on the train. He's looking at him. The man approaches the subway conductor's booth, starts banging on the window, asks to get in. They say no. He leaves. Then that man stands in front of him, and he says to him, "You're going to die." And he pulls out an 8-inch knife and starts stabbing him. Now, this is all in view of the police officers. So he fights the man to the ground, getting stabbed the whole time, disarms the man. Then the police come out of the conductor's booth and make the arrest. They administer aid to him, and he ends up surviving. Now, several years down the road, he's approached by someone who's on the grand jury of the trial of the man who tried to kill him. It turns out that the police officers were watching the whole time. They even said, "I thought he has a gun," and they were about to go out and help him, and then went back into the subway conductor's cart. Now, that's just one instance. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there has been numerous times where the Supreme Court has ruled that the state has no special interest or duty to protect life, liberty, and the property of private citizens without the promise of special protection, even if they are aware of potential or violent life-threatening event is imminent. There's no special duty. In DeShaney versus Winnebago, in a matter of a child subjected to beating from his father, the court ruled the state's failure to protect an individual against the private violence generally does not constitute a violation of the Due Process Clause because the clause imposes no duty on the state to provide members of the general public with adequate protection services. In Castle Rock v. Gonzalez, in the matter of a mother who repeatedly informed the police of her children had been abducted and later murdered by her ex-husband, who she had an order of protection against, the court ruled respondent did not have a properly interest in police enforcement of their restraining order against her husband. So we have two cases where there is violence against children being perpetrated, and the state ruled that there's no special duty for the police officers to protect them. you know, there are cases like this where the Supreme Court has ruled that there's no special duty. And then there are cases like Uvalde where there's police officers on site that don't respond. There's Marjorie Stoneham Douglas where police officers don't respond. And those officers in those cases, they're protected because of this Supreme Court precedent. Now, conversely, there's a study conducted between 2014 and 2021 where there was around 323 active shooter instances in the United States. A quarter of those were stopped by an armed citizen who stopped a threat. A quarter of them. Additionally, the FBI estimates that there's 1.67 million instances where a defensive handgun is used to either stop a crime or actually, not stop a crime, but to stop a crime either through shooting or just brandishing the weapon. And 1/10 of those actually occur in public. So when I hear that you should put your trust in the state to protect you, I have no confidence in that. And I think, you know, before you vote on this bill, I want you to ask yourself, do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in the right to self-protect? And do you think that you should be wasting taxpayer money on a bill that you know, as soon as it gets passed, is going to be challenged in court? And you're most likely going to have to pay the court fees against for that court case, those court cases. So please, that's my testimony. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the Senate committee hearing, and I'm open to any questions if you have them.
Thank you for your testimony, sir.
Thank you.
Just sit there for tight, and we'll see if
Sure.
there are questions. Go ahead, Mike. Mike Glenn, right, sir?
Mike Glenn, yeah. Here goes nothing. Sorry, I don't have a good side. I'm going to read this quote only because it's going to bring me down, because I got to admit, this is the first time I've done something like this, so it's kind of interesting. Patrick Henry, speech on June 9th, 1788. Are we at last brought to such a humiliating and debasing degradation that we cannot be trusted with arms for our own defense? Where is the difference between having our arms in our own possession and under our own direction and having them under the management of Congress, or in this case, the New Jersey State Legislature? If our defense be the real object of having these arms, in whose hands can they be trusted with more propriety or equal safety to us as in our own hands? Patrick Henry. The reason why I bring that up is because I think that in my view, I've got 3 minutes to prevent the legislature from usurping the rights of the citizens of the state of New Jersey, and yet I've served this nation for 26 years in its service, in its army. So to think that somehow I can somehow save that in 3 minutes, for me the equation seems off. I don't like the math. The one litmus test that I would propose for this bill, because right now, in my view, in my personal opinion, this bill is a solution in search of a problem. You already have many more carry holders out there in the state now, and according to your predictions, what you predicted should have occurred already. It is not. That's a fact. Okay? So my litmus test to continue would be, if you were to amend the bill to apply it equally to every enumerated right that a citizen enjoys. So in other words, if you want to apply fees and training and mandatory interviews, then you need to apply it to speech. You need to apply it to voting. You need to apply it to due process. You need to apply it to religion. Basically, if that law was enacted in that way, then I don't think we would have another meeting. We wouldn't have the ability to have one because we wouldn't have the training, we wouldn't have the permits, and we would never be able to get them in time. It would basically effectively end the guaranteed freedoms of this nation, those freedoms that I fought for, literally fought for. I also served the city of New York with a fire department for 26 years, not at the same time. And I got blasted through a lobby, literally. Every time I shave, I can see that scar on my neck. And I gotta tell you, I don't understand why I'm sitting here in an annex hall in Trenton trying to defend the rights of the citizens of the United States, because anything that happens in New Jersey can spread. Okay? The fact that I'm defending that after all that service and after all that time, it's astonishing. I cannot wrap my head around this. The law that you have right now, honestly, I don't agree with it. That being said, the problems that this bill proposes to fix, they don't exist. To table this bill and move it forward to the next, even to the next legislative session, will give us at least enough time to figure out two things. Is there a problem, and does it need fixing? And with that, I yield my time.
Thank you, sir. And your service, both in the fire department and to our country, is not forgotten. We appreciate that. Questions for these two gentlemen? Okay. Thank you. Brad Hendrick, come on up, sir. And Dan Cruz. Dan, you here? Okay, well, Brad's on his way up. Joe LoPorto. Come on up, Joe. So we'll go Brad Hendrick first, and followed by Joe LoPorto, representing an organization called Safe Way Out.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman Sarlo, senators of this committee, and to the thousands of Jersey gun owner activists watching this live stream. My name is Brad Hendrick. I'm a military veteran who served 8 years in a federal law enforcement capacity. I'm a New Jersey permit to carry holder. I hold carry permits in 6 total states, including Massachusetts, Connecticut. I can legally carry in 40 states today. I'm here today as an ordinary citizen, the voice of 1 million Jersey gun owners. All my testimony, story, and documentation has been emailed to every one of you on the public record. This bill is a law-abiding citizens with firearms in public bill. Stop with the general gun control narrative. Stop with the talking points. Let's stay on this bill. That was a famous phrase from the Assembly voting session. Stop listening to people who come up here with stats from states like Mississippi, who ranks #1 in the country with gun deaths per capita. Giving such stats any weight in the context of this bill is totally disingenuous to New Jersey concealed carry laws as they stand today. Now, let's talk life and death. Pre-Bruen, there were 1,200 New Jersey citizens who met New Jersey's unconstitutional justifiable need standard. 1,200 people who are so at risk. New Jersey said, yes, you need to carry a firearm. This bill, when it's passed, will totally disarm those people. So I'm asking all of you, will you go to their funerals? Will you apologize to their families and their loved ones for voting yes on this bill? Think about that. In 2022, according to Everytown for Gun Safety, Massachusetts had the second lowest gun rate per 100,000 in the country, beating both New York and New Jersey. And there were 497,000 Massachusetts residents with active license to carry a handgun. So if law-abiding citizens with carry permits were the problem, you'd know it. It's a very similar state. Look at that state. They've done it. It's been successful. Well, Massachusetts is not direct parties to the Bruen Supreme Court case. Massachusetts did have an unconstitutional good reason standard, which they repealed. However, Massachusetts did not throw a temper tantrum like New Jersey is doing with this bill. Have any of you stopped to maybe stop and look at peer states who share the same anti-gun values as you all do here in New Jersey, and how their concealed carry laws have been working successfully for decades? Because they have. If you take Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York, all today, as we're sitting here, there's 1 million law-abiding citizens carrying concealed firearms in the public. And all those states hold an A rating from the Giffords Law Center. Stop with the fear-mongering. I submit Exhibit 1 with that backup to the committee. I submit to the committee a side-by-side comparison produced by Everytown for Gun Safety, comparing New Jersey and Massachusetts gun laws. When it comes to legal guns in public, New Jersey today, without this bill, as we sit today, is doing everything Massachusetts is doing, but Massachusetts has 497,000 people in public with guns, and it still is the second lowest gun rate nationally. Again, it's a proof right there. I submit to the committee today, Giffords Law Center showing New Jersey, as it stands today, meets Giffords' entire gun control wish list, with the exception of 2 items which do not in any way relate to concealed carry. Again, we're sticking with the bill. So now, this is the Budget Committee. Let's talk money and how this bill is going to waste millions of New Jersey tax dollars. This bill does not distinguish new carry permits from renewal carry permits. This adds a considerable amount of administrative and financial burden on the state and municipal police departments. For fiscal responsibility of the state and these municipal tax dollars, this committee should demand a separate, more streamlined renewal process. This bill will make the approximate total permit to carry fees to be $465 per annum, $925 2 years. 5 years is going to cost someone $2,300. This outrageous and prohibitive permitting cost associated with this bill will absolutely price out and deny a constitutional right to a significant amount of low-income, law-abiding citizens. I submit to this committee a comparison of all 50 states, of all the licensing and the pricing, which you can compare and see New Jersey will be the highest in the country. This bill is going to cost New Jersey taxpayers millions of dollars due to the endless litigation against both the state and local municipalities. Just yesterday, New York was given a $1.2 million legal bill from the plaintiffs for the Bruen decision. That was just one case. I submit to the committee how the FBI got it wrong in the assembly. They testified giving all this weight to the FBI report. Armed citizens stop active shooters, that's Exhibit 5. And I'll close with this. New Jersey gun laws may be many things, but they're not dumb. To call them dumb would consider them to be an oversight. They are deliberate obstacles to deter law-abiding citizens. They are well calculated. Take the time to educate yourselves on the current New Jersey concealed carry laws as they are today before you create new ones. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just stay there in case we have questions. Thank you for your testimony and all the research that you have done. I appreciate that. And thank you for your service as well, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Sarlo and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'm here today representing Safeway Out. Safeway Out was founded in 2018 by a disabled veteran and is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. We have helped over 600 clients who, largely domestic violence victims, were living in fear for their physical safety because they were being threatened by a violent person or persons. We provided security services, alarms, cameras, emergency hotel stays, and counseling services. When we polled our clients, over 60% want the option to legally carry a firearm. Many of our clients are indigent. According to the Poverty Research Institute of Legal Services of New Jersey, in cities like Elizabeth, Patterson, Newark, and Camden, over 25% of those populations are below the poverty line. According to the FBI, these 4 cities alone account for over 30% of the violent crimes reported in the state. Taking into account the increased statutory fees, increased costs relating to training, and some educated guesses on the cost to obtain the required liability insurance, S3214 would make the cost of obtaining a permit to carry 23 times more expensive than the average of our neighboring and nearby states, Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut. Making this process so hard and expensive is a thinly veiled attempt to restrict the rights of the poor, and that has obvious implications in creating a disparate impact along racial and ethnic lines. In an amicus brief submitted in the NYSERPA versus Bruen case, New York public defenders tell us that while African Americans make up only 18% of the population in NYC, they account for 78% of the cases for simple possession of a firearm. In their words, in those inner city communities, the Second Amendment is a legal fiction. This bill perpetuates a cycle of criminalization and incarceration for people in communities most affected by violent crime, who, because of laws like this, have no legal path to defend themselves. In response to NYSERPA versus Bruen decision, the New York Legal Aid Society issued the following statement. As lawmakers consider next steps in response to this decision, let us be abundantly clear. It would amount to a historic disservice to both public safety and the best interest of New Yorkers for Albany to reproduce a regulatory scheme that perpetuates the same disparate outcomes yielded under the previous law or to further criminalize gun ownership. Criminalization has never prevented violence and serves only to further marginalize and incarcerate people from BIPOC communities. This bill will do exactly that here in New Jersey. The financial burden of this bill substantially hinders the ability of the poor to exercise a fundamental right, and on behalf of Safeway Out, we request that you oppose this bill.
Members, any questions for these two gentlemen and the data and research they've provided? Any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I see Dan Cruz walked in, right, Dan? Just give me a minute, I'll get to you, sir, okay? Okay. Lisa Winkler, Moms Demand Action.
Chair Sarlo and other members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, thank you for your time. New Jersey has one of the lowest gun death rates in our nation. New Jerseyans are safer because our legislators have enacted sensible gun laws, and I want to keep New Jerseyans safe. If no action is taken to sensibly restrict concealed carry, broad interpretation of the Bruen decision will weaken our laws and make New Jerseyans as vulnerable as citizens in other states that have lax concealed carry laws. New Jersey's gun death rate is 4.9 per 1,000 or 100,000 citizens. Texas is 12.7, and Mississippi a horrific 23.4 gun deaths per 100,000 citizens. I urge you to keep New Jersey safe and release S3214 out of this committee. The idea that a good guy with a gun resorting to vigilantism will make us safer is a fantasy and not rooted in sound logic or statistics. The expectation that a good guy will have the skills to respond rapidly and accurately enough in a real situation to deter a criminal is unrealistic. According to research by RAND, and I like using this organization because they are nonpartisan and they operate independently of political and commercial pressures. According to them, NYPD police officers trained in gunfights hit their targets only 18% of the time. To expect a citizen with a concealed carry permit to be any better than police officers who were screened, selected, and trained to respond to high-pressure situations is ludicrous. If guns made us safer, the U.S. would be one of the safest nations in the developed world, not one of the worst. In addition, the data do not support the assertion that concealed carry decreases crime. On the contrary, RAND finds that there is evidence that concealed carry actually increases crime. And a favorite assertion by those looking to weaken concealed carry laws is that gun-free zones attract mass shootings and create victim zones. This is fear-mongering. Research by RAND found no qualifying studies showing that gun-free zones increase mass shootings or violent crime. And as this is a budget hearing, it is also important to note the economic impact of gun violence in New Jersey. Gun violence costs New Jersey $5.3 billion a year, of which $168.9 million is borne by the taxpayers, with an average cost of $594 per resident per year. While there may be budgetary impacts to this legislation, the overall impact of gun violence in New Jersey is far more significant. And as I close, I'd like to leave you with a quote from conservative Justice Antonin Scalia. And this was written in the majority opinion, District of Columbia versus Heller. Like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. The right was not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever for whatever purpose. And he goes on to reference our long-standing American history, harking back to the 19th century, that courts held that prohibitions on carrying concealed weapons were lawful under the Second Amendment. I urge you to approve this bill and move it out of committee. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Pringle, I'm a Cranford resident, and I'm testifying on my own behalf, as well as my wife, 3 kids, family in Lawrenceville, and the silent majority, including a good chunk of NRA members. As you could tell from the chair, most of you know me from not this issue. I'm a public interest advocate on many issues, but I've never, until the last couple of weeks, been involved in the legislature on guns. This is a person, so I'm here in my personal capacity. Until I'm just a Joe Schmo on guns. You know, like many folks, I have opinions, but I've never really done that much on it. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in gun control. They're not mutually exclusive, and even the Supreme Court today agrees with me. But something changed a couple weeks ago. I'm actually human. Like all of us, I think we pay more attention to these issues right after a tragedy. And a couple weeks ago, that was no different for me and my family. It was a little different this time because I have a senior at the University of Virginia. Like many parents, I got an alert on Sunday night. Within an hour, I heard from my daughter that she was fine. Thankfully and selfishly. She didn't know anybody immediately involved in that tragedy, nor did any of the folks, none of the folks she was especially close to were as well. However, they all knew somebody that was. Like any small community, you're going to know somebody, 2 degrees of separation. They knew people on the bus that were not hit, but were obviously traumatized. They knew the people that were injured. They knew the people that died. They knew the shooter. None of them would have expected anything like that. They were all in lockdown for many hours. This is just one of many. These things are happening. I think, if I remember the stat appropriately, I think there's 2 mass shootings a day in this country. I am wrapping up. So, right, I wanted that context because, right, and now I'm getting to the heart of the bill, and I'll be 30 seconds. This is in response to the Supreme Court, and this is a debate both on what's constitutional and what is good policy. The Supreme Court has clearly said that reasonable regulation is constitutional, and the courts, define over time what reasonable is, as do legislators. And so this bill is an appropriate response to that debate, it's legislatures' jobs to do what you think is right, and then the courts can determine if it's constitutional or not, and you're guided by it. But if legislators never tested anything, we wouldn't have any laws. That's the nature of our representative democracy, notwithstanding the former president, who shall not be named's comments a day or 2 ago. This is really a policy call, and this bill is saying we want fewer guns, and we want fewer guns in public places. If you agree with that, you should be supporting it. You should be pushing the envelope. If you disagree with that policy, that's fine. But then your position is you want more guns in more places. That's going to make people safe, even though the overwhelming scientific evidence and the police, say differently. So thank you for taking this on. Thank you for pushing the envelope. Let's do things like this so that, and what I experienced and my immediate family experience was minor, but, I wouldn't want that on anyone, and let's do things to make that happen to fewer people. Thank you.
Okay. We have a few more folks here who have signed up. We have Trevor Ferrigno, Party of New Jersey. We have Mr. Cruz, right? Dan, you come back in. You want to come up, sir? Sure. We'll let Trevor go first. He's been patiently waiting, and then followed by Dan Cruz. And is Samuel here? Samuel Hedrick? You'll be next, sir. I think that'll be complete. I think I got everybody. You could just hit that. You're good, Mr. Ferrigno.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip the introduction and just kind of get into everything. My name is Trevor Ferrigno. I'm an accountant, competitive shooter, range safety officer, and an independent candidate for Congress in this past November. My objective today is to illuminate how coercion and misinformation has inspired the context of S3214. If you've come here today being told how to vote on this bill, that is not honest deliberation. It is despotism. On its face, this bill is a failure. This is due to corruption, party politics, and grandstanding for the governor's hopes of a 2024 presidential nomination. As lawmakers, your responsibility is to draft and enact effective legislation instead of a bill that makes carry impractical and impossible by restricting it in every place in New Jersey. The community at large would support a bill that restricts carry in historically sensitive areas like government buildings and schools. They would support a bill that restricts carries in places where metal detectors and security checks are used to reduce the prevalence of weapons. They would support a bill that sets a zero standard tolerance for alcohol consumption while carrying. This is a missed opportunity to implement practical and effective provisions that would empower the Second Amendment, allow people to defend their lives against criminal threats, and mitigate the use of legal firearms in our communities. Senate President Scutari stated on a December 1st chat box interview saying, "I was personally involved in getting law enforcement to not only back this bill, but to testify in favor of the permit restriction bill." And that's what it is essentially. In that same interview, he also said that he thought it was extraordinarily important to have law enforcement say to the public that this is a good bill and that it's good for public safety. As you're aware, law enforcement did not support this bill, and the Senate President accomplished his goal only after adding off-duty and retired law enforcement officers to the list of exempted parties. Wayne Blanchard, President of the State Troopers Fraternal Association, stated, "We are pleased that this legislation will not compromise the rights and obligations of active and qualified retired law enforcement." These statements acknowledge the intentional infringement of rights that this bill imposes on the public, and it exposes a quid pro quo scheme used to gain the support of the PBA, the FOB, the STFA unions, possibly in exchange for thousands of votes this November, and explicitly thanks the legislators for not infringing upon the rights of a certain class of people. There is no separate right for a police officer to carry a firearm. That right is affirmed to all Americans by the Second Amendment. In 2022, according to the New Jersey State Police estimates, the instances of homicide, armed robbery, assault, and home invasions are on the rise. My hometown of Fair Lawn, New Jersey, just experienced a drug-related robbery, assault, and stabbing 5 months ago in our town center. Just a few weeks ago, 3 blocks from my home, an invasion occurred where 4 victims were bound and beaten by 2 assailants dressed as police officers. New Jersey is currently on track to hit about 17,000 carjackings in 2022. Just last week, a woman with a disabled vehicle was held at gunpoint by an undetermined criminal who later took her car. Do you think that man applied for his purchase permit and bought that firearm legally? Crime is seeping its way into our once nice and peaceful neighborhoods. And federal case law affirms that a private citizen is primarily responsible for their own safety, and neither the state, active, off-duty, or retired law enforcement officers have any legal obligation to protect the lives of the public at large. It's evident that we are responsible to be our own first responders, and that you guys are doing nothing to prevent these crimes while simultaneously removing my wife's legal authority to protect herself from danger. Law enforcement have the obligation to apprehend and investigate. It seems that you guys would rather the police investigate the rape of an innocent woman than the justified shooting of a sexual predator. Let me make something clear. I have family who are law enforcement, and I support the efforts of all New Jersey law enforcement wholeheartedly. Supporting law enforcement efforts while also supporting a private citizen's right to protect themselves from the threat of death or serious bodily injury is not mutually exclusive. If you vote in favor of S3214 for all of the wrong reasons, the good and reasonable people of New Jersey will not forget. All the firearms owners whose rights you are about to trample on will show up to vote on the polls this November, and they just might vote for a candidate who stands with the party of New Jersey, because you will have exposed the unassailable truth that this State House is a place where the privileged come to live and the rights of the people come to die. Thank you.
Good. So, thank you for having me. Dan Cruz, originally born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey. I was once labeled a juvenile delinquent. here I am today speaking in front of you guys. Only because something bothered me in the last couple weeks. Quote, does anybody really want to put more guns in the hands of people that live in Patterson, Newark, and Elizabeth, and Camden to say, oh, the money you're charging isn't fair, said State Assemblyman John McCain. Yes. Those statements were appalling, we're out of line. What does that mean? The people of Patterson and Newark cannot have any guns or can apply for the conceal permit license? I have a business with my wife. We do deliveries all times of the day in different cities and towns here in the state of New Jersey. Just because you have people in the city who are unsafe doesn't mean that you're going to have people every day out there with guns. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are criminals out there now carrying guns. Every time I'm in the city of Patterson and Newark, on the south side of Newark, all through Patterson, I have to watch my back and look behind me. So why not give the same opportunities to the people in the city to have the right to bear arms? Paying a high fee of $1,000 is not what they need. It's not what they want. People in the city now, they're struggling to pay gas, to put gas in their tanks. They're not thinking about this bill. Most of those people don't even know this bill exists. The statement State Assemblyman John McCain said was utterly racist. And for some of us who sit here and did not say anything to the State Assemblyman about his comments, you're part of the problem as well. Had that been a Republican, you would have had a field day in the media calling the Republican a racist. Please review the bill, look at the bill. I come to you, I'm not speaking for the city of Patterson and Newark. Just alone, this past weekend, 15 members were caught in the city of Patterson selling illegal guns. This doesn't mean this is going to stop illegal guns in our state. Just last week, a student at Weekway High School had a gun. You're telling me that this bill is going to put more guns out on the streets? Law-abiding, responsible citizens deserve the right to bear arms. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Samuel Hedrick.
To hold a position as a senator or any politician takes guts, and it absolutely takes sacrifice, and for that you have my respect. Every time a gun is discharged, it is not an act of violence. For example, there are 12 gun salutes at funerals, pistol and rifle competitions, clay and trap shotgun shooting, and hunting. Law-abiding gun owners aren't guilty of gun violence. Criminals are. What we are talking about here are laws trying to stop the defensive use of firearms, That is the proper term, and that is how we are going to refer to it from now on. If your argument for being in favor of this bill were phrased properly to state that this bill will prevent more defensive use of firearms in public, not only does it now sound silly, but it doesn't have the statistics to back up the argument. Any person who has a permit to carry a firearm for self-defense that isn't an active law enforcement agent is subject to the same use of force laws in New Jersey. Using your firearm for self-defense has to be an absolute last resort. If there is any option for dealing with or avoiding a threat and you use your firearm, you will be charged accordingly in the court of law and probably face prison time. This is exactly why the fear of road rage argument is not valid, because if anything, legal permit carry holders will be more likely to do everything they can to avoid situations so they are not guilty of breaking the use of force laws, which will guarantee jail time. Active law enforcement can insert themselves into a situation prior to it becoming a use of force scenario, and that is the fundamental difference. I've heard some in favor of this bill tout the low gun death rate in New Jersey as respectable due to safe gun laws. January through September of this year, 2022, there has been 158 gun murders in New Jersey. Aside from gun murders, there have been 694 gun shooting hits. This is unacceptable. Maybe if some of those gun murder victims had a permit to carry, the number would be less. The majority of New Jersey voters have no idea that A4769 is even happening, and if this bill gets passed, the backlash will be greater than anticipated. A good percentage of the voters who support their representatives in favor of this bill are firearms owners. For those that state, we shouldn't have to fear when in public that people are carrying firearms, I sure hope that they have never crossed a river into Pennsylvania or vacationed in Florida or any other 2A friendly states. They probably never even thought about it while playing mini golf with little Jimmy or attending a restaurant for dinner. More than likely, the bartender, staff, and other patrons were armed, even though alcohol is served. Because yes, the two can be in the same building at the same time, as long as the person in possession of the firearm isn't under the influence. This bill was obviously written with emotion and sponsored by force. I ask you to vote no on this bill and stand up to those forcing your hand. Stand up to the special interests. Stand for the people. Have integrity. Try something different. How about saying no to this bill? Getting together and publicly announcing that New Jersey is now a shall issue carry state and put criminals on notice to think twice before committing heinous crimes. We the people are the true protectors of the Constitution of the United States. We the people are the voters and taxpayers. We the people are your employers, and we the people will never trade moral values for financial values. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I want to first thank all those who have testified here today, both in favor and opposed to the bill, for your testimony, your well thought out testimony. I know this is emotional to some, a constitutional issue to many, but I want to thank you all. You're all very respectful of the process, and hopefully we were respectful in return, allowing you to speak openly and freely here. So with that, we're going to move towards a motion on the bill. Any members, any discussion by the members here? When we vote? Go ahead.
I will say this.
When you vote, you would like to do it when you vote?
Okay.
Does that work? Yeah. Okay. I have something to say too, and I'll say it when I vote as well on the bill. So we're going to ask for a motion on the bill. Senator Dagnan, second by Senator Greenstein. Roll call.
On the motion to amend and release Senate Bill number, the Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill number 3214, and to release its Assembly counterpart, Assembly Bill number 4769, and Assembly's Committee substitute.
Hold on one second. So it's a Senate Committee substitute. This reflects all of the changes that have been made since that first initial hearing in the Assembly. These are the changes that were negotiated. So this is a Senate Committee substitute. We're not amending. It's a complete separate committee substitute.
Senator Oroho.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate all the testimony. The one thing that this bill will not do, and we heard the testimony, is stop any criminal activity whatsoever. We know it's heard already that we expect it's going to be challenged. I'm not a constitutional attorney, but I don't see how it could be constitutional. I know a number of changes have been made, but even the Assembly sponsor of the bill mentioned that in one of the recordings that this bill will affect and was essentially going after law-abiding citizens, which is, to me, it's ridiculous. And right now, this bill goes way further than the idea of the right to carry. Those people who have a firearms ID card are going to be affected. Those people who are applying for, the right to carry, when we have the one pistol per month, are going to be, affected. The rise in the fees were discussed. The issue of insurance. This required the idea of insurance. There is an existing executive order that was telling the Commissioner of Banking and Insurance to essentially make sure that that kind of insurance can't be sold in the state of New Jersey. So how you have a mandate there, and then you have an executive order that says there should not be an ability to sell that kind of insurance. So for those reasons and many other reasons, Chairman, I vote no.
Is it no vote? Senator Thompson?
On the bill, this bill codifies sensitive places in which firearms and destructive devices are prohibited. The only people that are going to obey that section of the law are law-abiding citizens. That is to say, they want to carry it for self-protection or to protect their friends and neighbors or to prevent illegal actions. Someone who's decided they're going to go somewhere to commit a robbery or to shoot somebody, etc., are not going to be concerned that the law says, well, I can't carry my gun to do it. They've made up their mind what they're going to do. So again, this penalizes the people that will want to carry a weapon for legal purposes, as opposed to it is not going to deter any individual who's decided, I'm going to go out, I'm going to rob this store, or I'm going to shoot somebody, or etc. So the purposes there are self-defeating. I vote no.
So no vote. Senator Testa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence. I have multiple issues with this bill. Some have already been elucidated by my colleagues. This bill only hinders the lawful gun owners in our great state. I also think that this bill flies in the face of the clear and unambiguous language of the Bruen decision. The first point that I have is, and it's a question, what other constitutional right must one purchase liability insurance in order to exercise? I'm not aware of any other constitutional right guaranteed by our U.S. Constitution and now our United States Supreme Court where one has to purchase liability insurance. And I know I can already project that people will say, well, you have to have insurance if you want to drive a car in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey has always recognized that a driver's license is a privilege and not a right. So they are easily distinguished between the two. The Supreme Court seemed to project that they knew exactly, especially Justice Thomas, that where other states would go in interpreting the Bruen decision and broadly defining sensitive places, and they cautioned any state interpreting the Bruen decision against broadly defining those sensitive places. They actually specifically stated that broadly defining sensitive places would eviscerate the general right to publicly carry arms for self-defense. And that's a direct quote from the Bruen decision. I won't belabor the point here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of debate on the floor of the Senate. I've just made those few points there that I believe this statute is overly broad, goes much too far. I believe it will be ruled unconstitutional if it should pass the Senate, the Assembly, and be signed by the governor, and therefore I must vote no. Thank you.
Senator Testa is a no vote. Senator O'Scanlan?
Again, thank you, Chairman, for giving us an opportunity to speak. I spoke extensively about this bill in Law and Public Safety Committee, so I'm not going to reiterate that, but just a few quick points. the testimony today was really good and articulate, both sides. But the fact that the costs here in New Jersey versus other states for a permit to carry are regressive and way too high. We heard from that gentleman who mentioned the comments by one of our colleagues about Patterson and Camden. Unquestionably, some of the people in these places, there and other places of any color, lower on the socioeconomic spectrum, who may have a legitimate, absolutely legitimate concern for self-defense, simply won't be able to afford to exercise the right like any one of us could. That's a serious problem. The other, another great point that was made was the incidence of gun violence in other states with much more relaxed carry restrictions. Massachusetts specifically as a good example. Pennsylvania as well. There is no continuous and absolute correlation. That should disturb everyone who's going to vote for this bill. The likelihood, the absolute certainty we're going to have a costly and doomed legal challenge to this bill, as we've already seen under Bruen and what's going on in New York, it's a certainty. So this bill ultimately is nothing more than a political statement to de facto outlaw the constitutional right to self-defense by making carrying and abiding by this law virtually impossible for someone to do without running afoul criminally of these very low standards and restrictions. It is a recipe for disaster. We will hear people who were trying to abide by the law stumble into a place that conflicts with this law and end up criminally charged. For all those reasons and the ones I've already articulated, I'm going to vote no.
Is a no vote. Senator Winkler? Is a yes. Senator Johnson? Yes. Is a yes. Senator Diagnan? Is a yes. Senator Cruz Perez? Is a yes. Senator Greenstein? Yes. Is a yes. Senator Ruiz? Yes. Is a yes. Senate President Scutari has left a vote in the affirmative. Chairman Sarlo.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank members on both sides for your indulgence today, and especially for those who testified. I believe the bill that's before us, the work that the Senate President done we've taken great steps since that initial Assembly hearing on that bill. You heard the Senate President say there's potentially more work to be done. Clearly, there is an uptick in, since the Bruen case, there's an uptick in borough halls, or I should say police departments, local police departments, and in our courts for people who are requesting the ability to carry a concealed weapon. And there are folks who are looking to the legislature for direction on some type of law. There are, I think if we all got together here in this room, both for and against, we could probably make a list of sensitive places that we all can agree on, and there's a list of places that we're not going to agree on. I like the severability piece of this, that there are some very important parts of this that are needed, and there are some other parts that perhaps can be challenged. The Senate President said that himself, the insurance piece, and how far do we, the insurance piece being one, and the second piece, how far do we go with the list of places, or the sensitive list of places. I'm sure they will be challenged, but I'm sure hopefully as we go through this, they could be flushed out as well. I want to thank everybody. I'm going to vote yes on the bill.
The Senate Committee substitute for Senate Bill number 3214 and its Assembly counterpart, Assembly Bill number 4739 ACS, are favorably released and are identical.
Members, we're going to